Our next interview is with Seth Kaller, and we're here at the New York International Antiquarian Book Fair. It's April 5th, 2014. And Seth, like I've asked everybody else, I'll do the same with you. Tell us a little bit about your background, your family, mom, dad,
Sure.
siblings, where you were educated, etc.
Sure. I actually grew up in the rare stamp business. I should ask at the beginning, should I be looking there or you?
Just look at me. It's
Oh,
okay.
okay, sorry. So I'll start over. I grew up in the rare stamp business. My dad was in stamps, and also my mother was in rare coins. And I would go to stamp auctions and see these free francs, and some of them have letters. And that just got me interested very early on. In a trip to the National Archives when I was 11, I believe, looking at the Declaration of Independence, inspired a love of history, and I was just lucky to find that I could make a career out of it too.
You have at least one sister.
I have two sisters. Yes.
I've only met one, but I don't.
Yeah.
And so, what are your sisters involved in?
One of them is in a business with me, and the other is in works in the financial industry and in healthcare also. So, and we were a family business, and stamps, then coins, then historic documents. And in 2003, I decided to go out on my own and focus on taking care of clients and building collections. So I'm not so much a dealer as the greater part of my business. I'm an agent and collection builder and a dealer that, because I see things that I love and want to be involved in them,
sure.
so if I can buy it and eventually find a home for it, I do.
Talk a little bit about your internet experiences. Good, bad, indifferent?
Yeah, we started out very lucky. So in the first week of putting things on the internet, we sold a Thomas Jefferson letter for almost $40,000, I think, and it was a good letter. So we assumed that it would go very well, and then it actually took a long time to make another sale. Now we sell some things on the net, but we've also met good clients who have looked at a particular thing and found us through there. So for us, it's brochureware, in effect.
Do you do any catalogs?
I do occasional catalogs.
Occasional.
Yeah.
When you say occasional, is that like once a year or?
Just about, yeah.
Just about.
Last year we did a George Washington catalog, and it was 2 years before, really, that I did a Lincoln catalog. So find a couple of great things and build
around
theme collection, yeah.
As a source of supply, I would think with the internet the way it is, there are going to be fewer and fewer autographs and documents turning up in the future from this internet generation.
Yeah. Of course, we go way back. So
Yeah.
in American history, I focus on the earlier presidents, earlier being maybe Grant and
back.
before.
Yeah.
And that was before we had the presidential libraries and the National Archives and the Library of Congress. So anything could have been sold. When George Washington went home, he took his papers with him.
Yeah.
But that changed, and now there are whole classes of papers that just aren't legal to be sold. They belong to the people through the National Archives. And then there's the correspondence being done on the internet, and fewer things.
Yeah. I mean, because used to be, you would want to you write a letter, dear Seth, how are things going, blah, blah, blah. Now, somebody just sends you an email, and it's just a piece of paper, isn't it?
Yeah.
It makes life a lot more difficult, I think. I know why you got into the book business, and I know why you were attracted to the book business. But when you first started in the trade, who were some of the people, other than your family, who were advisors or mentors or very helpful for you?
Yeah, because in documents, authenticity was a key issue. And so we went to Charles Hamilton, and he was extremely helpful. Robert Batchelder and Paul Richards were among the great ones who had been in the business for 40 years or more.
A long time.
Yeah.
Well, Ken Randell's been in it for a while.
And James Lowe, I should say.
And, Jim Lowe.
Jim Lowe is
Is he still active?
He unfortunately passed away
Oh, so another person who's died I didn't know about it.
yeah,
How long ago?
last year.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I knew him well in the 60s and 70s, but lost track of him in the 80s. But in any case, anybody else you can think of that was perhaps a mentor or a good person for you to talk to?
Bill Reese on book questions.
Okay.
Yeah, and people in different specialties. And I also worked with some of the scholars, the papers of Abraham Lincoln or George Washington. And pretty early on, we were lucky to find really the perfect client. And we started building this great collection, the Gilder Lehrman collection. And so I very soon had my clients' tremendous budget to build a museum collection, and so I got to know people pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's a great thing when you first come into the business and you have one great client that helps you build everything else around.
Yeah.
It's really great. You're pretty fortunate to have gotten that. In the few years that, well, the 10 or so years that you've been doing this, what have you seen as some of the big changes in the trade?
The internet actually has made things that used to be scarce much more common and available. So that's one thing, particularly on books and not as much on manuscripts, but to some extent where there would be a rare signer of the Declaration of Independence or a rare Civil War general, and it turns out they weren't so rare, they were just hard to find.
Yeah.
That and research, though, the main difference that the internet has done for us is to be able to read a letter and look up the name, and instead of having to send somebody to the Library of Congress to do research and figure it out 6 months later, in 2 minutes, we can often
You got
find
all
out.
the answers.
Yeah.
You get all the answers in a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Which is really great. Did you go to college?
I did. I started out at Hofstra, which is where our business was, and then I transferred to Penn. So I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania.
In Wharton School?
No, just
not
undergrad.
Just an undergrad. And after you graduated, you went into the family business?
Yeah, I was working throughout college, actually, pretty much full time. And then got into this and figured I'd do this for a couple of years and then go to law school and get into the environmental law field. But I got into this enough that my clients convinced me to stay with it.
Stay with it.
Yeah.
So you don't miss environmental law?
No, I don't. I mean, my wife tells me to get a job, but this is really a tremendous
You guys have any
field.
kids?
Yeah, we have 3 kids.
Ages?
13, the girl, Jordana's 13, and Ben is 12, and Noah's 11. 10, sorry.
You had them right in a
I
row.
appreciate it. Yeah, 18 months apart, the spread.
Yeah, your poor wife.
Hence the frazzled look at book fairs in many years past.
Last, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that frazzled look. I look at my cheat sheet here. What do you see as some of the great challenges facing us as booksellers and autograph dealers as we move forward into the next decade?
Being able to add value ourselves with so much information available on the internet. It used to be that the expertise of the dealers was really irreplaceable, and now people at least think that they can find everything they need to know. But it turns out that really the experience of handling so many things is something that you can't just Google.
You know, somebody once told me that they worked at Sotheby's for about 25 years before they went into business for themselves, and they said they handled just about everything you can imagine.
Yeah.
It was a great experience to work at an auction gallery in that day. I don't know about now.
Now it's a challenge to bring new, younger collectors into the field. I experienced this in the stamp field first because stamps used to be the thing that was collected by the smart young boys. And then came TV, and then came computers. And the smart young boys were on the computer instead of collecting stamps or books. But we're seeing a shift now, and the books that I deal in are historical also, the Federalist or
Yeah.
printings of the Declaration of Independence thing. And the Common Core in the schools, at least we think, may start teaching history again in a way that people appreciate.
I mean, it's just, how do you turn people on when you can't even do it right?
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons that my clients built the collection was to use the original documents to get people involved. Because when you're looking at a piece of paper that might have actually changed history, certainly Lincoln letter was touched by Lincoln, but if he's ordering a general to make some move or dealing with foreign affairs or dealing with people, it actually could affect the world that we live in today.
Absolutely, I
So,
agree. It's kind of funny when you think back. When I think back when I first started, there were tons of autograph dealers
yeah.
everywhere, and there was material to be had almost everywhere. And then look what's happened. It's gone. Fewer autograph dealers and fewer material.
Yeah, so much of it's been donated
Yeah.
in historic documents.
Do you still find decent stuff coming up for auction?
We do. We find some great things at auction. We find some great things privately. We've been sort of pushing, not pushing, but the vast majority of what we sell ends up being donated. But sometimes things come the other way, out of museums or out of historical societies. And so there is this fresh material, but it's not of the quantity or quality that the people who mentored me used to have available.
Yeah. I remember going into Goodspeeds and talking to Gordon Banks, and he would pull out a Washington letter, a Jefferson letter, just you name it. He could pull it out of a drawer. And I used to say, well, how's that? It's still here. It's not sold. What's the problem? And I think nowadays you look back and wish the hell those days were back when you had all that stuff.
Yeah, clearly.
Ooh,
It's
those were the good old days, as we used to say, us old timers. As we're moving ahead here in the book-selling world and the autograph world, it seems to me that 10 years ago I would have said there are no young people in the trade. Now I turn around and I look and I see at this book fair, I see a number of people under the age of 40, which I think bodes well for the whole situation. And do you find that the same correlation between people who are in the trade and people who are becoming collectors? Do you have a lot of younger collectors, or you just...
I do. Some of the real serious ones are older collectors, and people who have been giving the donations are older, but I have some younger collectors who are really hands-on in building and deciding what kind of content, what kind of things they want included, which is great.
Yeah, I think that more younger people are visually oriented than us older people who like books, the maps, prints, a one-page Jefferson letter, something that you can frame up and, hey, see what I got? You know, that kind of stuff.
Some of that, but there are other extremes too. I have a client who we might talk about a book that's in French about the American Revolution or something, and the next day I'll have it in, he might see it in a dealer catalog and we'll have it sent to us. We'll look at it and show it to him. But by that time he's already read it in French through the internet and decides, this is something that he wants. So that.
A lot of people are telling me that the advent of the iPad and the advent of the Kindle has hurt books. But I think it's only hurt books under a certain level. And I don't think it's hurting rare books or autographs.
I think you're right, and the iconic pieces have done very well, and they are, in a way, starter pieces. One of our great specialties is Declaration of Independence imprints, and I've often found that would be a first purchase from somebody who's not yet a collector, and then with that, they start getting interested in other things and become real collectors.
What do you find are the most saleable autograph items today, autograph or manuscript things?
Well, for me, and it
Yeah.
might not be the case, but for me, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson,
Presidential stuff.
presidential signers of the Declaration of Independence, but the rare ones are still collected,
Oh, yeah.
and important content in terms of women's history or African American history, founding of the Republic, and the iconic documents, the Constitution and Bill of Rights and things like that. So people do understand those and do collect those, and a certain percentage of them can move on to wider collections.
It's an expensive proposition to start off your collection with a Federalist.
Yeah, well, especially if you're talking first edition,
Yeah.
but there are other ways. And Lincoln documents look at it this way. The last Emancipation Proclamation signed by Lincoln that I sold was a little more than $2 million. But at the same time, for $225, I have an 1863 printing of the Emancipation Proclamation that people back at that time would have read and been involved with. So the old newspapers or old books, if they're not the most rare, are still accessible.
Where is your base of operations these days?
White Plains, New
In
York.
White
Yeah.
Plains? And do you work out of your house?
No, I have an office, and I have 4 or 5 guys. Right now, they're all guys who do the research and cataloging and just keeping up with the business.
Are you by appointment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We tried the retail,
Oh,
and
you
that
did.
didn't work for us. We had a gallery at Macy's Herald Square, and for a few years, and actually, that was the toughest years in this business.
Yeah, the first 5 years of any business is always the
Yeah.
toughest. Well, that's what they taught me in economics school. So,
Yeah.
what part does your sister play in the business?
Well, we're really we own some things together from our prior businesses, but it's really I operate separately.
Oh, okay.
You know, frankly, I'm not for the air, but Robin was in the business sort of as a back office person,
Yeah,
so she actually doesn't know anything about books.
that's okay. If she helps, from time to time,
Yeah,
it's
but
good.
now it's just a
Now, it's you and 4 guys.
yeah, and Robin's in it just as an artifact because there's stuff that we bought 10 years ago that we haven't sold yet. But
What is your dad up to?
he's doing charity projects.
I haven't seen him in a long time at a book
Yeah,
fair.
yeah. My dad is very involved in the Red Cross and fundraising ideas for them and a local children's charity.
That's great.
So he works every day, he keeps busy, and has gotten back to the stamps a little bit. But he was never he was extremely helpful in the business, and that's how I was able to get into this so quickly, is learning the tricks of the trade from the stamp business. But he was never a historic document person.
Yeah, I remember that. He was always a stamp guy,
Yeah.
which is okay. There's nothing wrong
Yeah,
with stamps.
yeah.
Some of them are worth a lot of money. I've never seen any of them, but some of them are worth a lot of money.
Well, I have. I started
Yeah,
out.
You must have seen them. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, we had a block of 4 of the upside-down airmail stamp. and
really?
I forget how old I was then, but maybe 13 or 14 years old. So handled that
And stuff like it.
stuff like it,
It's-
yeah.
It's great stuff. You say that to somebody, they look at you like you have 4 heads. What's an upside down plane on a
I know.
stamp? You know,
Well, actually, they reprinted it
I saw
recently.
it. Yeah,
so
I saw it. So now everybody should know what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
But they won't. They won't. They won't pay attention. If a young person came to you and said, Seth, I'm thinking about becoming an autograph dealer, what would you say to him?
Don't give up your day job. It's, really not just funny, it's sound advice, I think. It's
Yeah.
a tough business to break into. And one needs a lot of capital to deal in the great things.
Sure.
It can be very slow. Sometimes there are times when I buy something that I think is going to sell right away, and it should. and it
Doesn't.
doesn't. And 3 years later, somebody who I offered it to sees it on the internet or somewhere at the book fair now and buys it right away, and it's like exciting new thing.
I know, it's a
So
mystery.
You have to be patient and believe in the material and not be. You have to be aware of the market and react to it, but also lead it if you're going to be good in certain fields.
I asked that question to a friend of mine, Doug Harding. I said, what do you think is the most important thing for a young person who's going into the business? He said, own your own building.
Yeah.
That was all he said.
Yeah.
Own your own
Right.
building. And there's probably a lot of truth to that. With the costs, especially in the Manhattan area. My God, it must be so expensive to have any kind of space. I don't know what
Yeah.
Rendell pays for his place in Madison.
A lot. It's
yeah.
a small space. and
Yeah,
pays
he
a lot,
tells me
but-
he has figured out what every square foot of space is worth.
Mm-hmm.
And he tries to only have those things that will fill the space that will show a profit. I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, we can't quite do that either.
No.
I mean, there are a lot of things when we're collecting for clients or even dealing in that are inexpensive. And if you're buying $100 thing, even if you can sell it for $300, you've got, to pay 5 people and for space and reference library and all.
All those expenses and all those
Yeah,
costs come
yeah.
first.
And I can't help myself in buying some of the cheaper things, but from a business point of view, I really shouldn't.
It's like the third person today who said that I shouldn't be buying this, but I can't help myself.
Yeah,
I love this book and I
Yeah.
wanted it. It was only $100 too. So, to each his
Right.
own, I guess,
Right.
is what I would often say. What do you think you're up to now? You're going to be in the trade for, what, 10 years now or more?
How long I've been in?
Yeah.
Well, actually, 25 years.
If you start with the
Yeah.
stamps and go on, do you see?
More than
It's
than
more
that,
than because you
it's
started when
35
you were
years.
yeah,
Yeah.
because you started when you were a
Yeah.
young kid.
But 25 years ago is when I got into historic documents.
Do you see this as the rest of your life?
Yeah. I mean, actually, if I had the money, I'd be a collector instead of a
Yeah, well,
dealer.
yeah,
So
but-
some way, I'm going to be involved.
Sell all your stuff so you can collect.
Yeah. Although I have some other interests, and actually, there are some limits to this field, and because it's a
Yeah.
very small field, and there, like I said, don't give up the day job if you've got one. It's,
If you've got one, what if you don't have one?
Yeah, well, then you can
Go
be
apprentice for somebody.
Then you can be a better dealer than I am.
I don't think so. So as far as you're concerned, this is it. You're a lifer,
Yeah.
like most of the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
As you look around here, I see that there are a number of important dealers from all over the world, and I wonder just how well some of them do at a show like this. There's like 40 or 50
Yeah.
of them, and I walk by some of the booths, and some of the people are just sitting there like they're dead.
Yeah.
So do you think any of them are doing anything? Can you tell from where you're sitting?
Some are, but I've had shows where I've done very, very little business also, and it's just part of, for me, the process of being in the business and being seen, and you don't know if it's this year or next year or 5 years from now.
Yeah.
There are some things that I can trace, like a client who bought millions of dollars of things from me, started 4.5 years after I met him at a show. And took that long for him to actually pull the trigger on something, and then became a good client. So
Do you think it was a matter of money?
no,
No, it wasn't a matter. It was a matter of interest.
interest, time, comfort, and just the right trigger. So in that case, there was a document, a Declaration of Independence first, but manuscripts. There was a George Washington letter sending the Constitution to Thomas Jefferson.
Wow.
And it was coming up at auction,
Wow.
and I have a relationship with the Constitution Center, and he wasn't a collector, but I said, you should really buy this and lend it to them. And so that was the trigger, and then we started collecting some other things.
So you created a collector, in
Yeah.
a sense,
Well, that's what I've done.
which you pretty
Number-
much do all the
yeah.
time, if you can.
Yeah.
Creating collections is a future, gives you a future.
And the biggest one, the Gilder Lehrman collection, is they have programs in 3,500 schools now using the documents that
That's
we've
great.
collected.
That's
yeah,
great.
In every state. So,
That's great, and would you believe it? We have come to the end of our 30 minutes.
well,
Seth, thank you so much for participating.
Thank you.
Thanks for what you've said, too.
I appreciate it.